Boom, and we're live. Thanks everybody for tuning in to another episode of Men with Purpose. We're having conscious conversations around masculinity, what is masculinity, and we're really trying to have these conversations be pushed a little bit more into the mainstream so we can redefine masculinity and create more healthy male role models. Today I'm joined by Paul. Paul is the founder of Maniphesto, an organization based out of Copenhagen, Denmark, on a mission to restore men and masculinity. In addition, Paul is a trained psychotherapist and is one of the organizers of the European Men's Gathering, which is their flagship event. Hosted annually, this event has helped transform the lives of thousands of men. Paul, thank you very much for joining.
Thanks for inviting me.
My pleasure. All right, I'd like to start the podcast with just taking a few deep breaths and just doing a short check-in, whatever it is present for you at the moment. Mm-hmm. So whenever you're ready, let's take a few deep breaths. Mm-hmm. Okay.
So you want me to do some check-in? Yeah.
Yeah, you can do a check-in. I'll do a check-in as well.
Sure. So I am right now in the office of my father-in-law with the very postmodern art behind me, which is nice. I think most of it's actually made by my mother-in-law, and it's on a little island of southern Fyn in Denmark, where I'm actually buying a farm just up the road right now, which is going to be the new headquarters for Maniphesto. So that's like a really exciting thing. And I'm on the phone at the moment, like just before, like talking to the insurance company about the insurance. And then there's an oil tank that's buried in the backyard and we need to get that dug up. Yeah, millions of little things that need to get sorted out. So it's exciting. It's also pretty intense. It's also New Year's Eve coming the day after tomorrow, or tomorrow is New Year's Eve. Yeah. So lots of stuff happening. But it's really like a feeling of momentum building up and kind of a gathering of stuff happening. So exciting, great to be invited to be able to talk to this. I just checked out your YouTube, looked fantastic, a lot of good things happening there. So just great to see so much energy and good things happening in this whole field.
Thank you, sir. I'm feeling quite grateful to be able to have the opportunity to sit down and talk to you about this, and also very grounded. I did workouts today and I've been kind of doing a lot of productive work over the last couple of weeks or so. So I'm like really zoned in and ready to have this conversation. All right. So before we kind of get to how you got into men's work in Maniphesto and the European Men's Gathering, maybe talk us a little bit what you were like maybe as a kid and you were growing up. What was the kind of the story of how you got into this in the first place?
Oh, okay. How far back do you want me to go?
as far as you want, as far as you're comfortable talking.
Okay, sure. So yeah, I mean, I was born in South Africa. My father grew up on a farm. He went to school with bare feet his whole school life, actually, without wearing shoes. I went to school in a city called Durban to start off with, which is they called the last British outpost, and I'm an English native speaker in South Africa. But high school, which is from like kind of 7th grade up to 12th grade, was in a very Afrikaans school. And when I went to this they call it the factory at the school because they've produced more rugby players for the South African national team than any other school. So it was a very masculine school in many, many ways. That I kind of was in, and certainly I can see there was a lot of discipline, a lot of focus, and that's formed in many ways who I am. But I also left school with a desire to really go out and explore the rest of the world and see what else was out there. So when I was 17 years old, I left South Africa and went to London, where I believe you are right now, right?
And I'm in Bulgaria right now, but I had a similar trip, 17 or 18, just left for London as well.
Okay, great. Yeah. So that back then it was still possible as a South African to get a working holiday visa. So I went over there, got a job first at a bar for 2 days, then worked at a place called Tiny Computers with computer stuff. Then actually after some time got a job at a bank and was told, you're not allowed to have this job at the bank. And so, because my visa wasn't a proper working visa, right? And
Mm, mm.
so they said like it would be really good if you went off and traveled for a little bit. And so I ended up traveling around Europe. Long story short, landed in Egypt where I met a Danish woman. And yeah, now I've been living in Denmark for 18 years.
Wow.
A long story that I'll cut short there. But I would say, yeah, just to go back to your original question. So yeah, I'm coming to Denmark. I studied university here in Denmark. I studied political science, actually, where every single subject at university in Denmark, feminism was a major part of the subject. It was a requirement for when for that education. Or there was always the feminist perspective that was included. And so I kind of decided, well, everything that I learned back in South Africa about gender and, men and women and the way that we work together, that's all rubbish and old fashioned stuff. And this Danish way of doing things is much better. And so I tried that for some years, right? And then at some points in my life, I found it, oh, well, actually there was some value from my roots and from where I came from. And it's about transcending and including both of these perspectives instead of, just going from the one or the other.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah. Interesting perspective. Like you've been on quite the journey, I would say.
Yeah.
Almost like a mini rites of passage, right? Like
Yeah.
going on the other side of the world alone, 17, 18 years old, and just like having a kind of these plethora of these mini adventures. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Curious to know, you're kind of exposed to this field of studies, and feminism is obviously a mandatory subject that you need to go through. At what point do you kind of start to question, okay, what about masculinity, or how did you even get exposed to the field of men's work in the first place?
I'd say that came quite later. Like I think when I first got into men's work, I'd never heard of the term men's work. It's only something we've been starting to use the last maybe 5 years or 4 years or something like that. That's actually become a thing. So the first time I went to any kind of men's workshop was a guy called Eli Buren, who I'm so lucky to still be working with today. Fantastic guy, lives in Boulder, Colorado, comes over to Europe once a year. And he does workshops for men only. And so it's about creating a space where there's only men. And it's not because there's something against women, but what I found there was that, as I had gone from kind of a journey of like, okay, just wanting to achieve and like my career and earn more money and stuff like that, to finding like, there's something else in life that's missing. Like what there's got to be more than this. Then I found that I could actually, when I was in mixed gender companies, then there was lots of games happening or different kinds of, complexities happening. And when I was with guys, then there was another kind of directness and clarity that seemed valuable for me. And I found that very much in that workshop there with Eli. And yeah, that's just grown since then, I would say. Yeah.
Right. I can definitely relate to kind of a similar experience. And I wasn't really aware of men's work. I would say I'd started more on the path of maybe on the darker arts of seduction and getting women, all these kind of things. And then that didn't really resonate with me. So I was like, okay, how can I, focus on myself to become a better man? And like you said, there wasn't really a term for men's work at the time. This was maybe when I was around 19 or 20, so 11 years ago, but I started just consuming this. But the moment where you kind of step in an environment which is only men, and this is not about discrimination, it's just really something happens there which is very difficult to describe with words, when men kind of step into this kind of ritual space, to create this ritual space, which is very difficult, and it's difficult to describe, but also it's a quite unique to experience. And listening to you, I'm thinking, wow, it pretty much the same thing for me. I mean, it's a bit like a no man's land, like what's about to happen here? And then I think that really had a profound impact on my life. Okay, talk to me a little bit about after you visited the workshop, what happened? Was it this kind of a slow, natural progression where you kind of started delving more into this? Because I think this particular field of work, at least from what I've seen so far, seems to be very much rooted, or a lot of that seems to be or the mainstream is not mainstream, but a little bit more developed in America, particularly North America. Whereas in Europe here, there's not that much much going on with respect to men's work, or perhaps I'm missing something.
Yeah, I think Europeans, they are far more kind of philosophical, and we like to think about things. And Americans, there's a kind of like, go get them, go do stuff kind of attitude as well. And certainly I've noticed that as well. It's very interesting noticing the differences between kind of European approaches and American approaches. We have some American guys that have joined us in Maniphesto coming to European men's gathering, and we have a network called Core of online men's groups where there's Americans and Europeans sitting together, and the Americans love it. They love the kind of new perspectives that they get when they're sitting with European guys as well. Certainly, like, you feel like the lights kind of turning on in your brain sometimes a little bit more, but certainly there is sometimes, I really appreciate the American guys for the energy that they bring in. Like, okay, well, what's the action that what's the next steps here, guys? Like, how are we actually moving this forward, kind of thing. So
yes,
there can be advantages in both, but I've been in American only groups where a lot of it feels a little bit, there's a little bit too much of that kind of macho man, like, oh, and not a lot of reflection happening.
Okay.
But both are good. But your question was how I got.
Yeah, I mean, afterwards, was it a gradual development? Because obviously you set up Maniphesto a few years back. Was that because of maybe this kind of missing link, particularly in Europe, which at least I haven't really seen to be that present as it is in the US?
Yeah. I mean, I so basically, I came to Europe and, embraced a very secular postmodern worldview that I was taught at university, studying political science at university. And that worldview took me quite far in my career. I worked for Microsoft for 8 years and had a lot of success. I was at some point, I was the kind of global coordinator for Microsoft's global environmental sustainability strategy. Coordinating between the head office in Redmond and about 27 subsidiaries that were working with a focused strategy on this thing. And what I found was that I had ticked all the boxes of what I thought would make me happy, but I just wasn't happy. And so I really started looking for, like, well, what else is out there, kind of thing, right? And so I started, touching into the world of spirituality. I saw myself as a very atheist, kind of materialist, scientific person, but I could see that there was something in this idea of spirituality that was interesting somehow. And so I kind of did it with some ironic distance, I would say, but I would also find people who I thought seemed sensible and seemed to be doing valuable work, and who also were able to live what they were preaching. And I would invite them to Copenhagen, and I would have them stay in my home, and I would put on a workshop for them, or I'd get someone to help me and we'd put on a workshop. So I'd get to meet these people and actually work with them a little bit. And so I had, like, all kinds of, like, non-duality teachers and tantra teachers and all kinds of weird and wonderful people coming and hanging out with me. And then I got invited sometimes to, like, go to a little island in Thailand and live for 3 months on a commune of spirituality teachers and all this kind of, it was very interesting. Learned a lot of things, but more and more were drawn to these guys who were doing men's work, and found, like, that there was, like, I could really create strong, powerful friendships with these guys as well. And what I also saw with pretty much all of the others was that there was a lot of people who were incredibly charismatic and had beautiful ideas sometimes and could communicate them very well, but there was generally a trail of drama behind these people in their personal lives, normally with sexual relationships with their students. And that was also, again, which made me realize, like, this thing with sexuality, it's such a big part of who we are. And when it gets mixed up in a very confusing and chaotic way with spirituality, it actually creates cults and, very destructive, new agey kind of things that sometimes with these leaders who aren't, actually, they're good at talking the talk, but not always good at walking the walk as well, right? And so men's work seemed to avoid a lot of that in many ways, or at least the worst excesses of it.
Yeah. I mean, I was speaking with my cousin. I was just telling her that, I'm planning to organize a retreat here and it's going to be men only. And she said, oh, but why is it men only? I said, well, when you have guys, and I try to format, kind of explain it in a way that is just very biological. Guys are gonna start, acting up very weird just to get attention from women. And she reacted very abruptly to that. And I was like, okay, maybe I need to kind of be thoughtful of how I deliver this. But that's the truth, right? You have a bunch of guys, and then you have a bunch of women as well, which are mixed together. Then it's a very, very different dynamic, as opposed to having only men in there and just really feeling that brotherhood and sometimes the tough love that is coming as a result.
Yeah, I mean, all women recognize this as well. We call it desexualized spaces. Women sometimes need to have space where they're just women together, and they all will recognize the moment a man walks into the room, the atmosphere changes, especially if it's a group of single women, right?
Yeah.
And it's very much the same with guys. For a group of single guys and one woman, especially, it's a beautiful woman who walks into the room, then we act differently. We don't relax in the same way. There's acting out, there's competitiveness, ego suddenly steps in and takes up more space. And what I really love the most about the spaces that we make, the desexualized spaces that we make with men, is just the amount of disagreement that we're able to handle between us, and how that actually brings us together instead of pushing us apart. I think a large part of what we're seeing on social media with all of the, fighting and stuff like that, it's just really grandstanding. It's virtue signaling. It's people taking extreme positions in order to, kind of dominate other people, to look like they are somehow the good. And so there isn't any willingness actually to meet each other. And in these men's only spaces, we're able to create the bonds that then enable us then to create the strong relationships with women as well. So we underline very much, that we're doing this to be building up the skills and the ability and the character and the centeredness in ourselves to improve our relationships with women. And that's a very integral part, of it's in no way a kind of zero-sum game or anything like that.
Yeah, of course. I think I actually never thought about it that way, that, it actually goes both ways, right? If it's only women and a man comes in and then poof, like something changes, right? I think it's just hardwired in our biology. What you said there about having healthy disagreements when you're in a men's group or an event like this, I think is incredibly powerful, exactly because of those reasons. Everybody's kind of virtue signaling on social media today. I'm obviously generalizing, but that kind of seems to be the current state of affairs from what I can see.
It's the way that Facebook has designed their algorithms, it's explicitly designed to do that. So, it exploits these weaknesses in our cognitive processes, that we want approval from other people. So, and it's just made the systems to make that realizable. And we're more and more saying to guys, like, you have to really, really be careful. Like we've actually taken a principled decision now to get off Facebook. We're not doing stuff there anymore. And what we're seeing is an exodus from most of these platforms, because people are realizing how dangerous there is in the way that it's actually forming their mind. And people are moving more and more to other subgroups and other platforms, which are not just basically selling people out in the search for profits. The way that platforms like Facebook are doing. I think they're probably the worst, but far from the only example.
And it's also quite creepy. Funny thing, you're bringing this up. A couple weeks ago, I actually deleted both my Instagram and Facebook. And right now I have a separate device, which is only on airplane mode, stays only in one place. And I just use it to post content. Afterwards, I put it away. And I don't really surf the net at all. I just purely use it for, obviously reach, because majority of people are still on these platforms, although I full-heartedly support limiting. After watching The Social Dilemma, just a small plug in there, I think it's worth people to know that, or if you haven't seen it, please go check it out. How everything is really rigged against people, right? Social media is probably free, but it's the most expensive free type of media ever created, right? It's just sucking so much life out of people. It's crazy. So well done for that. I think it's a great thing that you.
Well, yeah, I'd say you've taken further steps than I have. What inspired you to take those steps of completely? Yeah,
sure. So obviously these new terms and conditions, they're not really new. I did a little bit of research. They've actually been in there for I think from 2018, the fact that they have access to your contacts, people that you're calling, the fact that they can check your text messages, not necessarily that they're reading it, but they can store them. The fact that before you could actually delete your all of your data, and now I think you have to wait for 30 days, and then this data cannot be deleted if there's like an investigation against you, yada yada yada. But the whole notion of everything is being tracked, everything that you go, the fact that it's really annoying for me to say something and then boom, I get a ad for it 20 minutes. I mean, even a couple of hours later, I'm just like, man, this is crazy, man. And I just kept I'm like super into it because I'm posting a lot of content and people are messaging, responding, but it really very how to say, it shifts my behavior in a very subtle way, and it's a continuous thing. So I'm like, wow, this is really bad. Also the amount of time I'm spending on it, just kind of browsing sometimes, like I could be doing a lot better things for me to serve other people, serve my community, serve, the purpose, rather than just, browsing Facebook or Instagram. So and for people who are actually interested a little bit more, the other thing I've did is I've isolated my browsers. So one browser I'm only using for Facebook and Instagram and WhatsApp, and I'm not doing anything else on it. On the other one, I'm using Google Chrome for Google, Gmail, etc., etc. So not to have kind of cross tracking of these kind of things.
Okay. Yeah. I have you heard Cal Newport? He's written a couple of books, but I just read a book called Deep Work. He basically puts together a couple of arguments, I think, where he says, deep work is becoming increasingly rare and increasingly valuable, and it's becoming more and more difficult to do, but fewer and fewer people are able to do it. And it's actually, it's a recipe to success is by isolating yourself and focusing in. Then you're getting out of this distraction economy where you're constantly multitasking and looking at different things. And a lot of people think that that's the way forward, is to be plugging in and being connected all over the place, but it's actually a trap. And I think it's not. I think for a lot of people it's shifting. For me that's the biggest expense of being on social media, is it's actually a new lens through which I see reality that's forming the way that I interact with the world. And then if you look at the amount of hours that people are using on these platforms, it's very, very high. And so by getting out of that, then I think we're able to see things more the way they are, instead of seeing them through the way that an algorithm is developed, which is at the end of the day, its only goal is to suck your attention to be able to show you as much advertising as much as possible, and make as much money out of you as possible by understanding exactly who you are and what your preferences are. And I mean, it's brilliant. If I ever open that YouTube app, it just knows exactly what video it is, like, whatever time it is, like it can always just find the little thing that's going to interest me, right? So
it's going to hook you. I mean, I think people don't understand that this really is a rigged game against us. Like, you're sitting there with your monkey brain, and opposite you is probably one of the most sophisticated computers ever that you're not going to beat. I've also deleted YouTube on my phone, so all of this is just out of it. Like, I'm not the Sorry?
What was the app you deleted?
YouTube as well.
Oh, YouTube. Okay.
Yeah. Because that could take a whole life on its own. But getting back to this book, I mean, our attention span is decreasing like super, super fast, and it's really frightening. And I think exactly like you said, I think can't remember, maybe it was a buddy of mine, Callum, in Thailand a couple of years ago, actually recommended the book, and I was just like, wow, dude. And I gotta say, I've been using kind of this method where I'm putting everything on airplane mode, and I've been super, super productive. Like, just doing, plowing through what I need to get done, and it really works. People, don't take my word for it. Try it for yourself, but it really works. All right, so this is a bit of a segue, which is actually quite a fun one. All right, how do you see? Getting back into the kind of topic of men's work, how do you see men's work developing in maybe in the next 5-10 years or so? What's kind of been your objective view on this?
That's that's a big question to ask. Really hard to tell. Really hard to tell, and it really, that it's so fascinating following how this kind of thing is just growing in the public awareness of men, masculinity, the role of gender, relationships between men and women, and the plight of men as well. I got to say, like, a lot more awareness from governments and organizations about, like, okay, well, there's actually something we need to focus on here. And so I'm seeing more and more reasonable voices and people who seem to get it. And I think for me, it's about, the way Maniphesto has operated so far is we've stuck under the radar. We've very kind of, it's very much based on word of mouth and guys inviting their friends to come to our events. We haven't done any marketing campaigns whatsoever. I've just recently, for the first time, been speaking to a marketing guy and got him to help me with some things. And I haven't actually pushed click on the first marketing campaign. So that probably will come in the next couple of months. But I mean, it takes courage to step up and to put out a masculine voice. And the demands are very, very high to be able to do that. And, personally, the way Maniphesto is built up is we see ourselves as a council. And my job is really in supporting the leaders of Maniphesto. So I don't see myself as some kind of, visionary kind of like, follow me, I'm the model of masculinity or something like that. And I think that's been one of the biggest problems, is that a lot of people, when they want to talk about this, they want to have like some icon or some kind of role model to look up to, or, very charismatic leader. Normally it should be an actor or a sports hero or something like that. And or those are the people who automatically kind of get access to that kind of leadership position. Mm-hmm. But I think that the way forward is really to realize, like, none of us individuals have the answer of how to be a man in this present day society. And especially as the shift to digital is happening, then, a large amount of men in all society for all of human history, they've been either, in the military or they've been in agriculture producing food. It's been hard physical labor, or, learning how to like attack other people with axes and swords and stuff like that, or shoot them, right? And so those jobs aren't really required anymore. We have robots and machines to do it for us. And so how are we going to be finding a role? We can't just have guys sitting and playing Counter-Strike. And so how are men finding purpose and meaning for themselves and direction in this new society? That's going to take us, seeing the value in each other and rebuilding the fabric of male-to-male relationships. I think that's where I see a large part of the possibility of a progress to come. And then from there, I think the answers will start coming out. But while men are, competing with each other and beating down on each other and trying to get the approval of all the women, that's where things tend to go wrong. Like, men have always protected and loved women, and there's been men who have dominated and oppressed women as well, right? And so I believe that, when guys come to us and they have problems with their relationships with women, we always say to them, well, sort out relationships with other men first. and then it's going to be easy to raise a woman. And the way that women choose their partners is they look which guys have the respect of the other men. I was never in the pickup community, but I understand that's quite like a solo thing, or at least you have wingman often, right? But I really, all the women I speak to, they look for, especially the women who are looking for, a long-term stable partner, not just to get laid, right? Then they're looking for, who is the guy who has the respect of the other men? And that's a guy who's reached a higher position in the hierarchy. And so often he'll also have money and status and a good career and stuff like that, right? And so, and when we're able to do that, and we do that through integrity, Western society are the most, the least corrupt, and our hierarchies are not perfect, but they're certainly better than most other societies that have existed so far.
It's a great point that what you're saying about, instead of, so I haven't really been in the pickup community that long, or really been that much into the whole notion of manipulating women or trying to pre-engineer a certain outcome is really very counterintuitive. It's not really me. Just like I don't really feel it is authentic. It does work full disclaimer, it does, I think it does get you what you're looking for. But I always say to men especially is like, first of all, try to understand other men, then understand yourself, then go and understand other women, how they think, how they act, why they act the way they do, which is a mystery most of the time, and then go and understand the particular woman, right? So rather, most guys are like, okay, let me go and understand the type of woman that I'm with, and it's very difficult. It's very difficult to kind of really, because you have to go through your own shadows, your own inner, you have to do your own inner work, all your, traumas, etc., etc. So I think it's quite an important thing to do your inner work.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the biggest challenges that we're facing is that a lot of people have got this idea into their head that their value as a man is measured by the amount of women that they can get laid with in, a certain period of time. And so they're, they spend inordinate amounts of time trying to pick up women, and something that takes up enormous amounts of their attention as well. And probably, if I had to be honest, then maybe the first 30 years of my life, or at least from when I would turn into a teenager, a lot of my actions were actually going towards that as well. Was about how do I get attention and appreciation and love, and in the times I've been single, then it's about getting women into bed with me. And I think that it's the wrong way around. And it's also trying to it's the wrong thing that I'm going for as well, because what most of these men are actually looking for is love and connection and intimacy, and that's not through these one night stands or these kind of quick hookups or something like that. And yeah, I've spoken to guys who they feel there's something wrong with me. I'm not regularly having sex with somebody, and then they'll get a prostitute or something like that, and that experience, or they'll go to a bar and they'll pick up a girl, they'll go to a tantra workshop and they'll hook up with somebody there, and then they'll just have this feeling of emptiness afterwards. And so I really see this as it's an addiction that's being fed somehow in society, and so sex is a very important part of our lives, but if you put getting sex regularly as the most important thing as a man, it's you're going to go off the rails, unfortunately. It's more, that's something that comes when you've got your life in order, and so you need support from other men to help you get your life in order. And then that will come naturally of finding, that's what women find attractive, is men who have skills, men who have a purpose, men who have direction, men who know where they're going, right?
Beautifully said. That's why I kind of, when I mentioned this, I referred to is the dark arts, because people really get addicted, especially men get really hooked and addicted to it. They seem to be able to get this kind of sense of approval, sense of affection from other men because of these conquests and constant performance of, they get like, I even have like friends like this that are addicted to the adrenaline rush of actually meeting someone new, having sex with them, and then off to the next one. And it's just like a repetitive cycle. And you're like, what are you doing, man? Like, that's how they find self-worth, right?
I'm guilty. I've been there.
Same here. Like how many women have I slept with? And it's a very, very perverted way, not to kind of judge. I mean, I am placing judgment on it, but I'm not saying it with a sense of shame or anything like this. Just objective, looking at it objectively and thinking, you know what, I probably could have done a much better job of being a little bit more honest with that person, and actually spending my time actually working on me, working on my inner issues, demons, etc., which is very difficult to do, right? So
yeah, I mean, for me, so this is about sex with different people, and it's also about pornography, and I think let's get to the pornography as well. But I'll start by saying, there's something about sex where in many modern discourses it's kind of been degraded to, it's just about like having fun, or it's about like love or something, but love becomes this very cheap kind of artificial thing or light thing. And for me, like having sex with someone is by far the most deep and intimate and almost sacred act that I can do with somebody. And so, when I just start doing it with many people at the same time, then, or, just in a solo kind of series with people after each other, then it degrades it somehow. The act becomes far less valuable. And so, but if I just choose one person to do that with, then I can spend the rest of my life going deeper with that one person, and I'll never get to the bottom of it. That it becomes more and more exciting the deeper that I go, if I'm able to stay in contact with that person and stay in intimacy with them. That's the real challenge that requires both of us to grow as human beings as well. That's for me the purpose of sexuality. But when I'm just like, doing it with a whole lot of different people, like even especially if I do tantra and things like that, then I can have all these like great, like powerful experiences and trauma and whatever, right? But at the end of the day, I'm really just desensitizing myself, and I need a bigger and bigger kick to get the same kind of effect out of it as well. And of course, that's especially the case with pornography as well.
You've used the word desensitized. I think a lot of men are actually used to this, and after a while, sex isn't really what it's meant to be, right? Sex is just this kind of mini achievement that leaves you even emptier afterwards, because sex, I think, in my opinion at least, deepens the more you spend time with the actual person. It's not just like, oh, I had sex and you kind of, that's it, and you kind of move on. Really, the real challenge, and this is where kind of we as men tend to fail a lot, is we think that what's going to give us more success and more fulfillment is the number of women that we hook up with, etc. Actually, the challenge is spend more time with one person, a woman that's really going to push those triggers. Really, she's going to kind of bring that shadow side of you that you're afraid to face. Like I have a couple of buddies of mine. One of them is a shaman, and there was a period of time where he was actually getting into intimate relationship, just using it as a vehicle for growth, just because these women were just challenging him constantly. He's like, what the hell, man, like I cannot take it anymore. But for a period of maybe 2 to 3 years, he was just like experiencing so much growth because he was in that kind of conscious intimacy, if you will.
Yeah, and I can see how that can be a strength. And then, because I've done the same thing, and long term, what I found is when I find a woman who sees what I'm doing in the world and just wants to support me for that reason, and she wants to get behind me for that reason, that then I don't have to kind of work for her approval, because she sees me, and because I've sorted out my own priorities enough that I know that what I'm doing is for a higher purpose as well. Then she comes to me. And then what I found, that's my wife. When I found that woman, I married her. And then I promise you, there's enough drama and challenges for self-development. Like that never ends. But the starting point for me to make that commitment, because I've had the relationships with women where I've thought like, oh yeah, well I'm learning and growing so much by this, in some ways it was too hard, and what happened then is my relationship, it sucked so much of my energy that became the center of my world that I was revolving around, which made me forget my purpose. And at the end of the day, a woman doesn't want you to make the center of her world. She might say that to you, that she wants it, but what she actually wants is your purpose is the center of your world, and she can get behind that as well and support that, and you're part of that.
It's such a counterintuitive thing, man. I think if you were to tell me this like 5 or 6 years ago, I mean, I was reading David Data, and I could kind of see that. But even though I was in a relationship back then, I think fear of commitments and long-term relationships. Oh my gosh, what am I missing out? Is this the right person? Are we going to be stuck with this person forever? Like, it's a scary thing. So relationships aren't easy at all. Like, you have to battle with your inner demons, your inner child traumas, things that you haven't worked through. Then come and meet the other person who's also dealing with those two things, for you guys to kind of come together and then deal with this whatever relationship you're having. So it's quite an interesting topic, very challenging as well.
Absolutely.
Talk to me a little bit about, because we opened the can of worms about pornography. I've been addicted to pornography for a very long time. I think this is really having devastating effects on men. From the retreats, the workshops, you mentioned also the core sessions that you're doing. How much is that a factor in men's lives today?
Well, it's not something that we talk a lot about at our
Mm,
events, I would
okay.
say.
Mm,
I notice that men often have a need to talk about it, and a lot of them hold as a secret. And I've held my pornography use as a secret for a very long time
same
for
here.
other people, and that gave it a lot more power over me. So sharing it with someone else who I trust, I don't think this should be shared publicly or on social media or anything like that. But having brothers who support you in the right direction that you can share it with, I think is very, very powerful. But I also think that by focusing just on the addiction, you don't get out of the addiction. So it's about
Mm,
finding other things in your life that become more interesting than the addiction. Because at the end of the day, addictions are the things that we use to comfort us when existence is too painful for us. So we
mm,
turn to that, and that becomes our best friend in some ways, right? And some
mm,
people need that help every single day of their lives. And if we look at pornography use, it's not so much an addiction to pornography, but it's actually an addiction to masturbation to pornography as well.
mm,
And that's where it's like a lot of strong hormones that are at play and the dopamine kick from getting that. But I've seen very different science on this, but certainly very, very strong experience. And from all the men I've spoken to is, like that our life energy is connected to our sexuality. And when we're, like squirting that into a little piece of tissue every single day, then it's not getting used very, very well, right? But
mm,
and we're also totally disembodied, where our attention's on a screen. We're looking at more and more weird, hardcore, far out stuff that's, more extreme.
mm,
And not feeling ourselves, not in connection with ourselves, not in connection with another human being,
mm,
but
mm,
basically making love to this disembodied screen on the internet or something like that, right?
mm,
And so it's not an easy thing to get out of. Again, I don't think the way out of it is by focusing on it too much. I mean, I can see the value of, there's a program called SLAA, Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous. It's a 12-step program similar to
mhm,
Alcoholics Anonymous. I've actually been to 4 or 5 meetings and found that was a really good forum for me to kind of just share about what had happened to me, and also see how many people had the same experiences as me. But then I think it's really about finding other things that I can put my attention in
mm,
onto that can
mm.
replace that need. And that can take some time.
For sure,
And
like every other process, right?
yeah.
I can't remember who said this, but I heard this from Michael Gay. He's kind of a facilitator. He works with Sacred Sons. He said the opposite of addiction is connection.
Yeah.
And you get so much addicted to something, you're kind of, and like you said, this in this kind of really distorted, weird, perverted, disembodied way, where you're kind of looking something in the screen, you're kind of jacking off here, really puts you just deprives you of so much of your life energy, right? You're just kind of shooting a load and, oh, okay, that's it. And I mean, I get it. Sometimes men do have to do this because they're under a lot of stress, and this could potentially elevate some of the stress or tension. It's with work or with something else, but long term, it's not a good strategy at all.
Yeah, it means that you don't take the actions that are needed to deal with the root problems.
Mm,
And a lot of the time, I think it's like either nice guy behavior or macho behavior.
mm,
So a lot of the time, it's because I'm trying to be the nice guy, and at least not like my father. That's the most important thing, right? And that takes so much energy to be that nice guy all the time, that there's frustration and irritation or all kinds of other things, discomfort that builds up
mm,
inside. And then I use the pornography to kind of relieve that
mm-hmm,
stress and that
mm-hmm,
tension.
mm-hmm,
Um, Stress is a very modern phenomenon. I grew up in South Africa. People have a really tough life in South Africa,
mm.
but I've never seen so many people with stress as there is in Denmark. Uh, and
Wow.
and for me, that's very clear. Like, people are stressed. It's people who are living inauthentically. They're not being themselves. It's got much less to do with external circumstances. People can endure. I think what Nietzsche said, this thing: he who knows his why can endure anyhow. We
Mm.
can we if
I
we're
think it was
living
Viktor
according
Frankl,
to.
but maybe it was Nietzsche. So
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah. No, but you're doing this this podcast on purpose, right? And if I know what my purpose is, then I can endure extreme hardship,
Mm.
and a very, very heavy workload, because I know that what I'm doing is the right thing. I'm in the right place at the right time. And the stress is often from being disconnected from that, I think. And
Mm-hmm.
that's where we
Mm-hmm.
use addictions and then that's just one of them, of course. You know, there's a whole plethora, and you know, we all have addictions. You know, I think he who says like, oh, I'm totally free of addiction and is living a normal life, that's yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I think I can't remember what I heard this, but every single time you ejaculate, I think the French call it le petit mort, because you're a little part of you is actually dying. You're giving your life energy away. And you're absolutely right. You're addressing you're not addressing the core root, the core issue, which is probably you're living in some kind of, you're not really aligned, right? You're not aligned with what you want to do. You're probably doing something else, hence why it's creating all this internal stress. And I think a lot more people are actually feeling disembodied. I started, I've trained in like neurolinguistic programming, coaching, yada, yada, yada. But the moment I started working with the body, with somatic therapy, with bioenergetics, man, it's night and day. I'm not saying that one doesn't have any merit. By all means, of course, sitting down and actually talking with someone. This is what we do in men's circles most of the time. But using the body adds just a whole nother level of really stress relief, trauma release, etc., etc. I don't feel that many people are actually in contact with their bodies. They seem to be all kind of overthinking. This is kind of like what the culture is conditioned us for. And again, I'm obviously generalizing here, but for the most part, I see people trying to think their way out of problems, which doesn't seem to be working that well. So really being in embodiment, and in alignment, in congruence with yourself and with the body, I think really addresses a lot of these kind of core issues.
Yeah, I mean, probably it's certainly an issue of Western society, is that, you know, Descartes kind of like said, like, you know, he made us the observer of ourselves somehow. And so the mental became very important. And yeah, I think our education system also just prioritized ideas far above action and embodiment. But I also see the pendulum can swing the other way. And then people are also about, oh, we got to get out of the head and into the body. And then we can just forget about, you know, like having a budget and planning for our lives and stuff like that as well. So finding that balance, you know, you know, when I for some years I researched contact improvisation dance and their balance is a really important term. They're very scientific about it, you know, and there's no such thing as being in balance. It's like not a static thing. It's a, you know, human body, it's constantly dynamic. And so the moment that we think like, oh, now I found balance, now I'm the right balance between mind and body and stuff like that, that's, you know, so human beings are very dynamic beings. In Maniphesto, we have 10 principles, and principle number 10 is that man is mind, body, and spirit. So actually we have these three elements, and we think all three are just as vital and important. And of course, inside Maniphesto, we have vastly different ways of looking at, especially how to access the spiritual dimension, or how to deal with that aspect of man. But that gives at least some interesting conversations, and sometimes also some good rituals and stuff like that.
For sure. You mentioned the word ritual. Can you talk a little bit about the value of ritual? Because I think a lot of that is actually lost in our modern culture and society. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, where do I start? Well, I mean, for me, the value of ritual is also, you know, I'm going to go even further and say the value of religion, because I think we've kind of like, you know, decided we don't need religion, we can just get rid of it. And as we've done that, then religious practices are just bubbling up in kind of slightly new ways, but actually very, very old religious practices. And so one of the things we've looked at, you know, there's, you know, the obvious examples is just to look at it like football as a religion, right? Where the temple is the stadium, and you have, you know, it's ritualized war basically, but you have like shrines, and, you know, the ball, like the signed T-shirt from the final of the UEFA Cup is, you know, this holy object, and you know, you can go on pilgrimages, and, you know, it's incredibly religious. But, you know, consumption is also, you know, being an Apple consumer is almost being a part of a religion. Veganism and all these kinds of things have strongly religious elements in them as well. Most of them are apocalyptic. Probably the most widespread religion before Corona, certainly, that was climate change as a religion, I think.
Mm.
You know, you were evil and bad if you didn't subscribe to the prophecies of climate change, and you would be, you know, like kind of, you know, radically kicked down, and it's a very apocalyptic, you know, kind of like we're all gonna die if you look at the Extinction Rebellion guys as well, right? But all of these religions have rituals. And so when we reject the idea of religion and ritual, then it finds its way into our lives, because it's a basic human need is to have rituals in our everyday life. And so, you know, everything from just, you know, today I'd say like the most common altar in the home where the ritual is, it was the television for many years, and many homes it's still the television, but now it's almost like just sitting each person by themselves with their mobile phone or something like that, right? That's where we sacrifice our lives and our time and our attention on the altar of Facebook. You know, in men's work, we're trying to take this back and become aware of our need for ritual and for religion, and we experimented with, you know, mixing and holding different rituals. We created very basic rituals, and we're also, you know, really having very serious discussions. We have Buddhists, we have Christians, we have Hindus, we have Taoists, and we're having those discussions inside Maniphesto of, you know, and there's very obviously there's, you know, very different perspectives of how this works. But, you know, this last European men's gathering, we had 100 and something guys standing around a fire, an Orthodox priest blessing the fire, a guy dressed up as some kind of pagan Viking warrior, you know, holding a thing, and then every man coming up individually, talking about his purpose in front of all the other men, offering something to the fire, and it was really, really powerful. Yeah.
Man, you said something about ritual is kind of almost like hardwired for us as human beings. This is, and I never really thought about it that way. That's why I just kind of had like a mini mind explosion whilst you were saying this. So yeah, ritual, even if we kind of suppress it, and that's kind of maybe religion, kind of people moving away a little bit from that, just a ritual seems to kind of find its way back into our lifestyle, our everyday lives, right? Whether it's the kind of like you said, the TV, and I never thought about it that way. That's fascinating. Wow.
A lot of people would call, like, instead of Homo sapiens, the thinking human, that's the kind of Western Descartes kind of approach, Homo adorans, which means the worshipping being. Human beings need to worship something. And so if you look at human behavior, then whatever you put your attention on, that's what you're worshiping. And if you look at people through that lens, then you can see they are actually worshiping it, because they, you know, if it's money or if it's status or if it's, you know, whatever, then they dedicate their lives to it. We need to feel like we're dedicating ourselves to something bigger than ourselves. And so we can say, oh no, I don't do that. And then we end up doing it subconsciously anyway. Or we can say, well, what is it that I actually want to dedicate my life to? And that's why I find really meaning, because I'm able to make a completely conscious decision about what is it that I actually want to worship in my life.
Oh, that's great. That's great. I had a look on your actual website, and there you have a mentorship section as well. Can you talk a little bit about mentors? Because I think a lot of men, me especially, if I look back 10, 15 years, you know, and speaking to my younger self, the one thing I would have told them is go and find a male mentor, just to kind of really show you the mystics of life and kind of guide you through these kind of rituals, spiritual, you know, ceremonies, and et cetera, et cetera. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so we've realized the value of mentorship. Absolutely. And, you know, we're in a society which puts coaching as the kind of highest form. Therapy or coaching. Therapy is basically about someone asking you questions so you can talk about all your problems. Coaching is someone asking you questions so you can talk about what you want to do. But mentorship is something else entirely, because in coaching and mentorship, you have all the answers already. It's just about the coach or the mentor, like, kind of getting them out of you, you know, but no one can teach you anything because you are the sovereign individual, you know, person or whatever it is. Mentoring is different. Mentoring actually realizes, well, I don't know everything. And there's other people who've tried being in the same situations that I'm in and had success with it, actually. And they recognize what I have to do, because it's not, you know, many of the things I'm trying to face, like I'm trying to find a wife, and I'm, you know, trying to get a job, and I need to get sorted out with this my procrastinating, and
Mm.
I'm really tired, and I'm eating really crappy food. Like there's people who have faced these problems before and they've solved them. And so
Mm-hmm.
mentoring is built on this idea that will actually an older, more experienced person, their value is only in their experience, and that's what a mentor has, is they have more experience.
Mm.
In every other way, the two people are equals, and the mentoring relationship is two equals meeting, and it's important that there's that authentic meeting at an eye level as well, with the recognition that the mentor has more experience than the
Mm-hmm.
mentee. Is able to
Mm-hmm.
just ask him, guide him, nudge him in the right direction. Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
give him tasks to do. A lot of the times a mentor will say, go and do this and this and this, and come back and tell me how it went.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
the normal mentor approach.
Booyakasha, man. I like how you broke down coaching, therapy, and then mentoring as well. Beautiful, like very, very well synthesized. Finally got it.
Right, right.
Nice. In if obviously, let's talk a little bit about European men's gathering, without getting into too much detail, because I know that there is a certain what's the word I'm looking, confidentiality for what's actually happening on those events, and that's actually by design. I've talked it on many episodes, but I catch myself having to go through the same thing, because there is value in uncertainty and actually stepping into the unknown. Can you talk a little bit about what's happening at these events, and why men, which I wholeheartedly would support, why they should join you? I mean, how the whole idea actually came about in the first, sorry to interrupt. How did the whole idea came about in the first place?
Okay. I'll start with the first question, then we'll get over to that one as well. I think so. I mean, basically what we do with European Men's Gathering is we focus on creating a container for transformation. And that's not an easy thing to do. It's easy to give people an experience, but a container for transformation is not so easy. And so some of the elements that we have there is we place it far away from a big city where it's quite difficult for people to get there. So they actually have to put in quite a bit of effort to be able to make it there. And it costs some money, and they have to take some time. So it means everybody's invested to get there, kind of thing, right? And it's not easy to leave once you're there as well. So there's some like nervousness, like, oh, who is this going to be, and what's going to happen, and what are all these people and stuff like that. But then I make this decision with myself, okay, I'm committed. I'm going to go in there. And then, once we get there, then we create the first thing we do is we create some agreements of like how to, and the agreements actually form like the container for what's going to happen there. And so one of the first agreement that we make is always confidentiality, as you mentioned. So we say, like, whatever happens here, we keep it to ourselves. And so we don't, we're able to share anything that happens, and we can trust that the other men are not going to go out and talk about what's happening and things like that. So we're completely confidential. And then we have some other rules that just like kind of create the sense of like safety. And then from there, the European Men's Gathering, it's really based on, so the second question you asked me, where does the inspiration come from? We're really kind of, we're three guys that started the European Men's Gathering. It was myself. I was a political scientist at this time. Alexander Bard is a philosopher and music producer and a whole lot of other stuff, an author. And then there's a guy called Booster, who was a professional dancer. And we knew each other from a community called Burning Man, which is a festival over in the United States. And it's a crazy, hedonistic, wild, little bit mad festival in many ways, but they have some beautiful principles. And one of the strongest principles that kind of is there is the one of collaboration and involvement of all the participants. So everybody who comes is a participant and is a contributor. So you're not coming there to get spoon-fed by someone. And even if so, some very big famous names of different artists and musicians have gone to Burning Man, but even when they go, they have to buy a ticket just like everybody else. And there's no one that organizes a stage for them. They have to organize everything themselves. There's no central planning committee. So the European Men's Gathering, we do a little bit of central organizing. We create the frame, but then it's really, we have a crew normally of about 50 people out of the 140 guys who come, who are helping to organize, who are doing workshops, who are facilitating core teams, who are helping to organize work teams, who are all kinds of different stuff. We do panel debates and discussions and lots of different parallel things. And so people can really kind of find their own way through the event. We have a couple of rituals which are the same for everybody. And then everybody is in a core team. And these core teams, they meet regularly throughout the event. And they really like, that's a group of 6-7 guys. It's the guys who live closest to where you live in Europe, wherever it is. So they'll be from your local geography. So they'll be the most natural guys for you to contact when you get back to your hometown again.
Wow.
And then you share your journey with these guys. You talk about the experiences that you're having, and they tell you theirs, and you help to make sense out of it. And really, the purpose of this container is that inside a container, when it's safe like this, then we let down our guard a little bit that we have in normal everyday life, and we allow our ego structure to actually disintegrate a little bit. So we're not holding on so strongly to who I am and what I stand for. And I don't need to fight against anybody who challenges my way of seeing the world or my identity or whatever it is, right? And so I'm able to just let people kind of understand me and understand them a little bit more. And that way I can actually, at some point, normally on the Saturday evening, then we'll have some kind of vision exercise as well, which is like, well, what do I want my life to look like, and what would I like to change when I leave here, and formulate that in a way that feels right for me. And then on the Sunday, then we'll work on then integrating that vision together with the other men. Each man, especially in the core teams, recognizing, honoring, and appreciating the other men in his team for his unique contribution. That's what we're teaching men to do, is to appreciate other men and get out of the automatic kind of like combative, fighting against each other thing, but seeing how each man brings a unique contribution and value, and we work together, even with our differences, especially with our differences. That's when we can actually create value.
Wow. And that's a, for people that are listening, that's a mini rites of, I wouldn't say a mini, but that's a rites of passage in and of itself, that I think most men, we didn't have the privilege or the fortune to go through something like this since we were boys.
Yeah, absolutely. So Arno Rubinstein is probably the world's leading expert today on rites of passage. He came to the 2018 European Men's Gathering just before he ran a leadership development training, which the entire crew participated in, including myself.
Wow.
And so from that date, then everything we've done has really integrated integrated everything that he said. Because what we realized is, well, rites of passage, it's really just, it's a framework for creating transformational experiences and events for people that human beings have always done, through, weddings and funerals and all these things have always been rites of passages. But in Western society, we've kind of lost a lot of the meaning of it. It's the materialist mindset, I would say. I'm reading listening a lot to a guy called Jonathan Peugeot at the moment, who talks a lot about symbolism. That's really, for me, that's what the rites of passage, it digs deep into the symbolic understanding of reality, as opposed to our very simplified science. Science has an enormous amount of value in creating computers and stuff, right? But when it comes to understanding human meaning, science is meant to be neutral. It's value neutral science. So science is not how we create meaning in life. So even scientists need to sometimes look outside of science to find how to create meaning in their life.
Yeah. Wow. Beautiful. When is the next European Men's Gathering?
It's on the 5th of August.
5th of August, and that's a 2.5-day event?
It's from Thursday afternoon until Sunday. And we have a lot of men who come the day before, especially the crew. But it's open to anybody to come the day before, and everybody can help out. So one can even come from Wednesday and then until Sunday and get involved. So it's it can be a 4-day thing. It's in Denmark. It's a tiny little country, but it's up in the far corner of Denmark, close to the ocean and a big national park. A really, really beautiful natural area of Denmark. We have a big old school up there, which we have all to ourselves and can do all kinds of crazy, weird, and wonderful things.
Beautiful. I
really
think you just sold one more ticket. I'm definitely coming in.
Well, it'd be great to have you there. Absolutely. And I think with your interviewing skills, we could probably find some ways to use you as well. I'm quite sure.
I'm sure we can talk about it offline, but I'm already getting some ideas. All right. So if people want to know a little bit more about you, Manifesto, where can they go? Because obviously you're not on Facebook right now. What else can they what else can they find your message?
Yeah, well, www.maniphesto.com with a PH, not an F, but a PH is the website. We have an online network of men's groups called Core. So that's maniphesto.com/core. And then you can find the European Men's Gathering in there as well. We have a YouTube channel, which there's quite a few guys that are kind of starting to produce some content for that. A guy called Eskil just made a really great video on intergenerational relationships, relationships between men of different generations, which we're really seeing the value in. Yeah, so that's there as well. There's a blog on the website, maniphesto.com/blog, where we have a guy called Andrew Sweeney who's writing regular articles, really interesting stuff, talking to intellectuals. So yeah, that's a place. And yeah, for me, I mean, I'm on Core pretty much, very regularly. That's where I'm doing most of my daily work on Maniphesto Core. And then I have a mentoring page as well. So that requires a good personal connection with someone where we feel like we get along well together. Then I also do a bit of personal mentoring.
Amazing. And I think the YouTube channel is Manifesto with a PH dash men's work, correct?
No, just maniphesto.com.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, the YouTube channel you asked.
Yeah.
Oh, that's possible. Yeah, actually.
Yeah. I was checking it out. That's why I thought I'd throw it in there.
Okay, Manifesto with a PH dash men's work, one word. Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, thank you for getting that for me.
No problem. All right, Paul, I like to finish these interviews with one question. What's one thing that you wish I asked you, but I didn't?
I would say, I wish, I don't know. Yeah. Before we started, you asked me like, what, is there anything I shouldn't ask you or something like that? And I said, well, actually, I kind of like the prickly questions. So,
okay.
So, you could have asked me like, well, what's your faith or religion, or what do you worship, or something like that. You could have also asked me something about feminism or whatever. But I mean, I think actually we're handling those really, really well. So it seems to me like the kind of the polarity or the whatever, the anger has gone out of those kinds of questions these days, actually, which is really nice.
I mean, I would love to ask you, what do you worship, and even get into feminism. I'm also kind of conscious of time. I think you guys had a great interview with Dr. Warren Farrell, who was a feminist, and he kind of turned into kind of men's rights and the boy crisis. Go check it out. Great book. But let me ask you this. What do you worship then?
Okay, that was a trick question that you had for me there. Well done. Yeah, that was a good one. Well, what I worship, I would say, is what I show with my actions. Like so it's what I put this in the center of my attention most of the time. So I'm an Orthodox Christian, and that has a prayer rule. But I noticed most of the time I don't have my attention on God and on my prayer and stuff like that. So probably I think a lot of my time I worship my wife. I like to make her happy.
Good answer.
So I do that. Maniphesto, it's really interesting seeing how Maniphesto can take on these religious, ritualized aspects as well, and become like a little cult. And so I need to be, that's one thing I'm very aware of, is not putting myself up on that kind of like guru status as well. But yeah, I mean, the right answer to say is that, I worship God, and I don't know what God is, but I subscribe to the Orthodox Christian perspective of it. And I'm a fairly new convert. I spent the vast majority of my life as an atheist. And so it's an exciting journey for me, very much, to be diving in. And the reason why it's orthodoxy is because I find that it really brings together this body, mind, spirit aspects of the being in a fantastic way. It's a very, very embodied form of ritual and worship, as opposed to what I see, the Western Christian seems to be very intellectualized. It's
Mm-hmm.
more like, transferring one idea from my head into someone else's head instead of just being the light through my actions.
I think a lot of actually men, a lot of strong men are actually religious. I'm also Orthodox, even though I don't really subscribe to the religion per se that much. And it's something that I've been actually thinking more and more about. I think there's incredibly value and a lot of benefits to that. I'm not too sure if I subscribe to everything that's being espoused there, but maybe it's just a matter of time. I don't know. Like the more I dive into men's work, the more I see how some of it is closely related to religion, or at least some of the men's work facilitators that I interview or I'm about to interview tend to also subscribe to some form of religion. Not to say one is better than the other, but just the whole notion, like you said, it's kind of intertwined with rituals in there, and quite an interesting perspective.
Yeah, and it's challenging, especially talking about Christianity, that there's a lot of what I would call Christophobia, and certainly I had it myself. I spent a large part of my 20s going around finding any religious person, but mainly Christians, and telling them why they were wrong, and I could destroy their arguments very efficiently, right? And so there's, for me, it's a part of it is like, obviously our societies here in Western Europe are built on Christianity. And so a large part of what I'm looking at is our shadow in our relationship to fatherhood, and how in many ways Christianity is our patriarchal fatherhood roots. And so that kind of rejection of that is a reflection of our own relationship to the father. In many ways. And so at least coming to terms with that. And this was Jordan Peterson for me, who said, like the Bible is a book that's older than any civilization that's ever existed. Actually, some of the stories in it are, more than 10,000 years old. You can't just write the thing off as fairy tales. You at least have to contend with it. You have to take it seriously. And so that's what that was the thing that was like a real kind of switch for me, is seeing things that way and thinking, well, okay, yeah, that's right. I do need to take this seriously, and seeing it as instead of seeing it as like, oh, this like kind of weird, silly, stupid, childish thing, of actually giving it some respect for like, okay, well, probably this thing has formed our culture, our civilization, and try and understand it in that way.
Yeah, I mean that there's incredible amount of wisdom that stood the test of time, right? So there's definitely it's inevitable that there isn't some value in that. It's just it's the way it's being kind of pushed away, and people's
and misinterpreted and misused and abused. Yeah.
Wow, dude, I can probably, we can have another 2-hour conversation just on fatherhood, something I really wanted to kind of dive into a little bit deeper. Maybe we can do a separate interview on just on this, or even have a second podcast on this. Would love to do that. Maybe when we meet up at the European Men's Gathering, we can do another one.
I'd love to talk to you more, Pavel. So this was enjoyable. So yeah, thanks very much. I appreciate it. It was good talking to you. I thought some ideas through myself as well. So thanks.
Thank you very much, Paul. And also thank you very much, everybody who's listening, watching this. Thanks for tuning in. Go make sure to check out Maniphesto, the core, the European Men's Gathering. Definitely make sure to come there if you can. And I'll see you in the next episode. Ciao.
And don't forget to subscribe to Pavel's channel here as well. I forgot to tell that on my channel as well. Looks like there's some really good names that are down here, and I know you have more good names lined up as well. So
yeah.
So subscribe. I think it's worth saying it. I found on my channel.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. All right, folks. See you in the next one. Ciao.